Bring It In is where sports meets a lot of things. Business or politics, pop culture or social issues. With insight, nuance, and a bit of humor. We want to be your go-to spot for the most important sports conversation on the field and off of it. This episode will focus on media literacy for the 21st century sports fan. Remember last December when LeBron James took sports writers to task for not asking him about Dallas Cowboys owner Jerry Jones? Quick refresher. Old footage of a teenage Jones appearing among a mob of white people protesting the integration of a high school in North Little Rock, Arkansas, had just been published in the Washington Post. James wanted to know why the same reporters who had asked him to weigh in on Kyrie Irving's various controversies hadn't solicited his opinions on Jones. The likely answer is that James and Irving are co-workers while he and Jones don't have any direct connection we know about. But the better question, with implications for the whole sports media industry, is this. Why couldn't LeBron James have taken the initiative? He has, as of this recording, nearly 53 million followers on Twitter, 150 million more on Instagram, and he also owns a production company that puts out his talk show on HBO. When LeBron James says he's more than an athlete, he means it. He's also a publisher, as is every league, every team, and every athlete on the planet, thanks to all the usual social media suspects, along with YouTube and platforms like the Players Tribune. Athletes who used to need legacy media outlets to amplify their messages now have unparalleled ability to speak directly to their audience, and that's awesome. LeBron James' IG Live sharing his thoughts on Jerry Jones would have driven the news cycle for at least 36 hours. We'd have had no choice but to quote him, credit him, aggregate him, then follow up with him at the next press availability. And that setup where players speak for themselves on their own social networks is great for transparency, right? Isn't the best way to sidestep media spin to get the info straight from the source? Maybe, unless that source is also spinning, which they often are. So in this episode of Bring It In, we'll explore the shifting sports information landscape we all inhabit as fans, athletes, and media members, and discuss how to navigate all this content from all these sources on our journey to a higher sports IQ. Our first guest is a very good friend of mine in real life, but Shireen Ahmed and I were Twitter buddies first. Now, you might know Shireen as an award-winning sports writer, or as the co-host of the Burn It All Down podcast, or if you're here, as a CBC Sports senior contributor. But as somebody with a non-traditional sports media background, she can also tell us a lot about how social media helps make careers like hers possible. So Shireen, a lot of people might not know this about you, but you started out as a social worker, left that behind, you became a sports blogger, like you were blogging for free, but HuffPost started aggravating your work and it started going viral, but nothing goes viral without social media. So explain to our viewers like the role social media has played in taking your career to the next levels.
Well, absolutely. I mean, the reason I was blogging, like I've always been a sports journalist, but nobody would hire me. So I had to self-publish. So I had a blog, Tales from a Hijabi Footballer, talking about the banality of those things of like being Muslim, a Muslim woman in sport, hijab bans. And that's one of my pieces that did go viral by Huffington Post. They messaged me and they emailed me and said, can we use this? And I'm like, sure. Because for me, I've fed into that idea of exposure, right? That all aspiring journos think of, exposure. So I thought, okay, let me do this because I wasn't making any money anyway. So I was like, I would like to get that traction. And the pieces did quite well. And it was a voice that many had not heard from, or a perspective and a lens from which is still not often shared. So that's kind of how I kept going.
But that's a big part of it, right? Even when athletes talk about the way they use social media, it's because in a lot of senses, speaking through traditional media, they didn't necessarily feel heard because there was always this middleman or in rare cases, a middle woman. So what role has social media played? Well, the blogosphere first, obviously, and then social media played in giving a platform to voices that didn't necessarily have, I'm mixing my metaphors here, like a megaphone before that.
Well, no, absolutely. That's what happened. It amplified voices or created a space for self-amplification and self-broadcasting and self-publication. Like then Medium comes up and that was another space that you could publish. And I think for me, it was a place that I could control my voice. I didn't want it being shared if I couldn't share it myself. If people were like, oh, we'll publish it for free. I'm like, no, I might as well do it under my own autonomy, right? With my own control on it. And that was important to me. The idea was that I wanted to do that. And I also signed on to some other blogs. I worked at Muslim Media Watch doing reflections on Muslim women in sport, which was really helpful. So I was working on another one called Muslim Women in Sport, where I actually had a PhD candidate at Cambridge University editing my stuff. So I did have really sharp editors and helping me firm up the way that I was critically analyzing things, which was very, very helpful and has really helped shape my voice.
Social media at its best, and Twitter in particular, because everything happens in real time, like at its best, really democratizes the conversations we get to have around sports. Am I getting that right?
Absolutely. It's a place where people can chime in and people can respond. And I mean, there was very quickly how many followers you had sort of signified your merit, but I debunked that immediately. Like you had academics. I found Lou Moore.
Yes.
Dr. Moore. I found Lou on there. I found Dr. Miros Davis on there. I found all these interesting people. So really, I was able to, benefit from these connections,
yes,
but also share them and share knowledge. One of the most important things for me is because a lot of my work has had a global purview, is I've made connections with women in Australia, in Africa. I have a friend, Janine Anthony, who's in Lagos. She works for BBC Africa. I met her online and we've been able to DM and have chats effortlessly, that quickly translates into WhatsApp conversations and whatever, but having connections, looking forward to the Women's World Cup. They're colleagues I have in Australia that I've never met in person, so that I will meet there. And it's, for women in particular, especially on a global scale, it's been incredibly helpful because we help each other.
Yes. Yeah, and these communities that pop up, especially around live events, because a lot of times if you're into a niche sport, you don't know who else is into that niche sport until you are tweeting about it and using the hashtag. Like Rosie Perez, the actress. Yeah. You guys might remember from Do the Right Thing, White Men Can't Jump, if you guys are old enough or young enough like you and I are. But I had no clue she was into boxing until you would start seeing her tweeting about the same fight.
Rihanna and soccer.
Right.
Rihanna loves soccer. I mean, we love Rihanna and all of her makeup, but I love her opinion.
Yes.
And she's tweeting World Cup, previous World Cup. She was, had connections to some footballers, but I love that stuff. I love seeing it's, oh my God, not Leslie Jones. I love seeing Leslie Jones.
Yes, absolutely.
That's wonderful. She should absolutely be involved in soccer. Why shouldn't she?
Yeah.
And so there's ways that you reach different communities, but it's also a way that I found Twitter engaged fans and had them start thinking in a way and vocalizing their thoughts. Now, I'm not a huge fan of every supporter becoming a pundit, which sometimes what happens.
Yes.
But I do like the idea of conversations.
Yes.
And that's what, and meaningful ones.
Last word to you, Shireen. Again, we've discussed how powerful social media, especially Twitter in the sports world, because so much of it has to do with live events, can be. But that's changing. So you tell me, in 6 months from now, how do you see yourself engaging with social media? And how do you think your social media use is going to change professionally between now and, let's say, the beginning of the next premiership season?
So I feel like I'm someone who is interested and who is willing to explore social media generally, different platforms. I'm on TikTok a little, much to the mortification of my children. But it can be used. So it's a matter of finding a platform that works for me. I like doing video essays. I like doing short ones and taking something like that and making it shorter.
Yep.
And, just like disseminating information on TikTok, maybe having a bit of explainer videos, which I've done a couple of. And if it needs to be longer, there's YouTube, which I find incredibly useful. And a lot, my youngest son goes to YouTube for everything and TikTok. TikTok is what Google was for me, is what he does. It's a search engine, and then YouTube. And I feel like those are places that you can also hyperlink and embed, as long as I can use it in I'm still a scribe, right? I want to be able to embed it and to be able to share it. So I think, I don't know is my answer where I'll be, but in the immortal words of Sean Desmond, baby, I'm down for whatever.
What better way to end than on a Sean Desmond quote? I can't top that. Friends, That's Shireen Ahmed, CBC Sports senior contributor, professor at TMU, and one of my favorite people in the business. Shireen, thanks for coming out.
Thanks for having me, Morgan.
If you need an example of how social and legacy sports media can complement each other, look to my good friend Eddie Masonette. Right now, he's a senior editor at ESPN.com, overseeing their coverage of combat sports. But before that, he ran the Sports Fan Journal, a smart and funny blog that covered the space where sports and pop culture overlap. It cultivated a deeply engaged audience using social media. And before all that, Ed played a mean third base for the Langston University Lions, so he knows all about making transitions from athlete to blogger to mainstream media manager at the biggest shop in the industry. So Ed, before you were the combat sports guy, you also were overseeing basketball coverage. I look at basketball coverage, I see that CJ McCollum has a podcast with you guys at ESPN. Draymond Green is a basketball player, but he's also a podcast. So these guys are like making their own content, letting their own voices be heard, amplifying their own message. So my question to you is, like, we as journalists, how and why do these people even need us anymore?
Yeah, look, I think that they're actually kind of doing us a bit of a favor. I can't speak for every reporter, but I know you and I have been in locker rooms and scrums and things like that, and trying to get deep dives on, particular storylines, angles, going through the Wayback Machine, things that are happening in real time. It's not always easy to get that detail and that storytelling from the athlete. And so I do think that there is a real benefit, especially if you are if I'm a Clippers beat writer and podcast P used to be playoff P, Paul George this year, he is telling some tremendous stories. I remember he just shared the story about the fact that he thought Cleveland, when LeBron was still with the Cavaliers, was going to be the one. We're going to be the ones to trade for him from Indiana. And then at the last second, Oklahoma City kind of came in and stole PG for the deal. And so, we would have, the chances of anybody pulling that as a reporter would have probably been pretty slim. I don't think it's nearly as confrontational as it seems. I don't think it's a threat or to job elimination or anything like that. I think the savvy, smart, talented journalists and media members will use that as ways to amplify their content and storytelling going forward.
I'm not going to say exclusive don't exist, but they don't live as long exclusively on anyone's platform as they used to. So if you're a smart reporter, how do you work around that, and how do you turn that to your advantage?
Yeah, I mean, I think for a reporter, their opportunity is to clarify details, because I could say this as someone who's turning 40 in 3 months. Like, my memory ain't as good as it used to be, and when I am telling stories, my wife is very quick to be like, "Oh yeah, no, that's you totally misremember that." So, and it's not to try to invalidate an athlete's storytelling, but it's like The Last Dance, and I'm saying this as someone who is gainfully employed at ESPN. We understand that the Last Dance documentary was framed from the perspective largely of Michael Jordan. Mm-hmm. And what happened when somebody put a mic in front of Scottie Pippen's face? His angle was very different.
Yeah,
he had perspective that was very different. A good journalist understands there's more than one side of the story. And so I think that's the opportunity to have a complete circle of storytelling whenever possible.
Yeah, I think that gets lost in a lot of these discussions about athletes being able to cut out the middleman or middlewoman. You hear it straight from the athlete, as if the athlete doesn't have an agenda, as if the athlete doesn't want to spin things favorably to himself or herself.
Right.
When the reality is, they're spinning just like anyone else is spinning. And the way for a consumer now on the other end to get the least amount of spin might still be to put it through a medium. That's what the word means. Media is a plural noun. And so for you, where you work, ESPN, on the one hand, they're a media outlet, but on the other hand, they're also, a business partner with the UFC, with the NBA, et cetera. So, like, where you work in the combat sports world, like, how do reporters balance, like, covering the UFC the way it needs to be covered as an institution that has business dealings that sometimes are favorable, but sometimes, are shady, but also keeping that relationship alive? the business relationship
Yeah.
alive.
Yeah, look, it's not a secret the things that have happened and transpired within the UFC over the last 4 months or so. And so, as a business partner, a media partner, there is a delicate dance there. And I think what was always preached by our leadership is stick to the facts. And, because trust me, anything that we are publishing in relation to anything that has legal ramifications to the UFC, for example, guess what? I just used that word legal for a reason. We're running it by our legal too, because nobody wants to get fired. Nobody wants lawsuits. And we don't want, we come from an age now where people will sue you for libel, for speaking ill on someone's name. And we know that some of these organizations, I'm not speaking on anyone in particular, but they can be very litigious. And so we understand that by sticking to the facts and sticking to the reporting, at the end of the day, covers our backside while still being a service to the reader. And anybody that's expecting us to do an expose on our business partner doesn't understand the word I just used, business. Like, it's a business relationship. And I think the opportunity for journalists is, it actually is a good opportunity to sharpen your skill set to be on fact-finding missions. Like, that ability to write the facts and play it down the middle is still, it still works.
So before we go, Ed, you tell me now, put yourself in the audience's shoes. What is the best way for them to make sense of what they see and filter, whether it's from ESPN, from Morgan Campbell, from Master Test Fashion, or from Devin Hester, to filter the storytelling from the spin and kind of further their sports IQ?
Yeah. So, I'm not the first one to come up with this term, but I know when I think about all of the content and all the options that I have, I think about my fan-width, not bandwidth, but fan-width, right? What I've come to find, like a lot of people, is that I'm only consuming but so much stuff. And so if I'm a fan, this is your golden moment. This is we are in the golden era of content, and not just in what's on our TV screens, but what's in our podcasts, what's in our music, and everything. You can get everything you want, and you're basically paying anywhere from $4.99 to free to $4.99 to $9.99, to however much you're going to pay for the content, because you're doing it in podcasts, you're doing it in newsletters, you're doing it with the types of content you follow on YouTube. You can self-select the things that you want to make yourself a better fan, or, the type of fan you want to be, I guess, is the best way I'd say it. So I think this is an opportunity for fans to get the most for themselves. And I think as media members and the owners of media, I think what they're starting to realize is we need to be more flexible, and have that rigidity is actually going to allow us to probably lose people versus giving them more outlets and thorough ways to getting them in to our spaces.
Senior editor, ESPN.com, covering combat sports, Ed, thanks for taking the time to be with us.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you very much.
At its best, modern technology can make our sports knowledge broader and deeper and more accessible. Social media have allowed new voices and new connections to flourish and made possible conversations that would never have happened back when we all had to wait for the daily newspaper to keep us updated. You know what led to me standing right here doing this show? The head of CBC Sports diving into my Twitter DMs about 3 years ago because he liked my other work. Now, as for athletes bypassing the traditional media to tell their own stories on each other's podcasts, I'm all for it. Whatever format gets people to reveal details and insights they wouldn't otherwise share is the format I favor. Taken together, all these developments have the potential to make us all smarter sports fans, but whether they actually do is largely up to us. Now, as for athletes using their platforms to tell their stories, we can consume that content while still recognizing its limits, which become clear every time somebody tests positive for a PED. When somebody tells us they ingested steroids in a tainted taco or from eating too many eggs, should we take them at their word just because they're active pro athletes? Of course not. They are peddling alternative facts, and the audience can appreciate a journalist eliminating the spin and giving us the info. So yes, there's more content than ever, and much of it is outstanding. To find it, you have to browse and consume with discretion. Use your head and hope for some help from the algorithm. Thanks for joining us on another episode of Bring It In. I'm your host, Morgan Campbell, and we'll see you next time.